So, what's better practice? Growing mushrooms from liquid culture or growing mushrooms from grain spawn? Well, a lot of people are pretty set in their ways and will answer pretty much automatically, and most of those will probably say grain spawn around this area. But I have to say, it basically depends on your use case. Grain spawn is very reliable. You get a fast colonization out of it when you're adding it to a pasteurized substrate, and it can be used to produce huge amounts of mushrooms. Liquid culture is also reliable in its own way. If you have a pure culture that you are starting from, one that you've perhaps tested periodically or at least kept track of, you can rely on it with some certainty. You can use that liquid culture and inoculate a substrate that's designed to allow it to colonize and then fruit directly from that substrate. It's something we call an all-in-one bag. That's one way to grow mushrooms out of it. But the thing is, when the all-in-one bag produces mushrooms, it's coming from a sterilized substrate, and that mushroom growing on a sterilized substrate doesn't always seem to have the same ability to fight off contamination once the block is colonized. Sometimes you'll find that it succumbs a little bit faster to contamination from dirty air. And you can use liquid culture and grain spawn together, in fact, by using liquid culture to start grain spawn, which is a really good way to kind of bridge both worlds. If you want to keep your own collection of liquid culture, all you have to do is basically buy liquid culture media jars. Get yourself one or two or more liquid culture syringes from a reputable online supplier, and go ahead and have those liquid culture jars colonized. Then when they're colonized with the liquid culture of each specific type, you can use those to start grain spawn and go on from the grain spawn and use that to put that to pasteurized substrate, produce a ton of mushrooms via that method. I find that the advantages of going from liquid culture directly to an all-in-one grow, sterilized grow bag, are that you've got a lot less work involved, a lot less steps. Essentially, you take a liquid culture and you inject it into your prepared recipe, the all-in-one bag that's sterilized and cooled and waiting for an injection, and allow it to colonize and grow mushrooms directly off of it. If you're working with grain spawn, you're either buying the grain spawn or you're starting it from your own liquid culture or agar, depending on your tool base. And once that grain spawn is colonized, you're then adding that to pasteurized substrate, and you can actually that actually expands your ability to grow mushrooms by not forcing you to sterilize all of your substrate. So one of the bottlenecks in this field is that if you do rely on sterilized substrates, most of the time you're working with a pressure cooker. If you have an all-in-one bag, it's probably pressure cooked, and the pressure cookers aren't that big generally for the ones for residential use. I mean, if you're a big mushroom farm, you can stuff as many things into your cooker as you can fit, the size of a couple of refrigerators or more. But the people at home, have a limited amount of space in their pressure cookers. So what you can do is you can create your grain spawn using a pressure cooker, and then using a steam device like I have an electric wallpaper steamer. You can steam your wood substrate, your wood and water substrate that you're going to add your colonized grain spawn to. That actually allows you to have like a larger container, basically something you feed steam into for a couple of hours, allowing it to come up to a pasteurization temperature where it doesn't kill off all of the microorganisms in there. And once that's pasteurized and cooled, you can add your grain spawn to it. Now, if that sounds like a lot of steps, it is. It is a lot of steps. I've been doing all the steps myself, and I can tell you that doing them all requires time and commitment and being very careful. And going from liquid culture to agar to grain spawn to pasteurized substrate to fruiting mushrooms is a lot of steps and takes as long as it sounds. If you buy the colonized grain spawn, that reduces the amount of time it takes for you to get mushrooms because you're not worried about making the grain spawn or colonizing it, and you can colonize your pasteurized substrate in 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so, and go ahead and start producing mushrooms that way. So it's a little faster than starting from just liquid culture. Generally, if you inject something with liquid culture, like an all-in-one bag and it's going to, if you start with a small sample, it's going to take longer than if you were to start from a fair amount of grain spawn. Just the colonization rate's a little bit slower. However, it's a lot less steps when you're starting from liquid culture and an all-in-one bag. So, while you can have, with your grain spawn to pasteurized substrate grow, you can have a little bit of extra resistance against contamination. You can have a little bit faster colonization rate in your substrate. In your all-in-one bag, you can have less steps. You can basically prepare, cook, and inoculate the bag and then fruit directly from the bag without additional steps. That's pretty appealing for a home grower, I have to say. You can do all the other steps. You can do as many steps as you want to, frankly. In this hobby of mycology, there's an economy, and you can start at any point in the economy and either purchase from it or contribute to it. You could buy spore samples. Start from the spore samples and do every single step of the process and end up with mushrooms. You could buy liquid culture syringes and make your own liquid culture jar, go on to make your own all-in-one bag, and save money by doing that, making your own stuff. You could decide instead to purchase some colonized grain spawn that someone's made for you. You could use that and have the experience of mixing it with your own pasteurized substrate that you made. There's a number of ways that you can enjoy this hobby, I recently watched a video. This isn't going to sound like it has anything to do with the topic, but it does, okay? I watched a video that was about making biscuits back in the 50s. Apparently there was some sort of biscuit mix or baking. No, it was a cake mix. I'm sorry. It was a cake mix back in the 50s. And it had everything needed all inside the cake mix. And all you had to do was add a little bit of water and then pour the batter into a pan and go ahead and bake yourself a cake. And it turned out to not be very popular. And they couldn't figure out why, because it was a massive time-saving device. They figured great time-saving product. And when they interviewed a few people who were considering the product, they said that they wouldn't use it because it took away the joy of baking. If all they had to do was pour ingredients from one container to another and stir water and put it in the oven, they didn't enjoy it. Where was the enjoyment? So instead, what they started doing was leaving out some of the ingredients, specifically the egg, and saying that it would require egg and water, and in some cases, a little bit of milk. And from there, you've got your modern cake mix. And the modern cake mix is perfectly capable of having all of those ingredients together and simply requiring a little bit of water and going to a pan. But the reason they don't do that is because people enjoy putting that stuff together. People enjoy putting their own stamp on something. People enjoy feeling like they're being part of a hobby and they're making the hobby part of them. So when you decide whether you're going to go with liquid culture or grain spawn, what you really have to decide is, what is the work that I want to doing? Yeah, you have to think to yourself, do I want to go through all of the steps? I could take it from spore to agar, from agar to grain spawn, from grain spawn to, I could expand it to more grain spawn, and then from there go ahead and go to a pasteurized substrate that I made, and then go on to make 1 million mushrooms. That's one way to do it. That would be described as the commercial process here, and I would say that the other way to do it would be to start with liquid culture. And with liquid culture, make your own all-in-one bag or buy an all-in-one bag, inject it, grow mushrooms directly from the bag, and do it with a reduced number of steps. You just have to decide what are the steps that you want to do. You really can do either one.